oops, this isn't what I want to share.
Well, I see that there are 41
on
people.
YouTube now.
Yes, I see that there are 40 people now attending our BayChi monthly program meeting, and I'm happy to have everybody here. I'm the chair this year of. I see that there are 41 people, and I'm excited about tonight's program. I see there are 40 people now attending our BayChi, and I'm happy to have going to take a moment to tell you about BayChi. BayChi is a organization that's been around for since 1989, and it is the Bay Area Computer Human Interaction Group. It's loosely associated with the SIG Chi community. ACM is our organization that we're underneath. And we are the biggest traditionally SIG Chi group. And we hold these meetings every week, every month. And they've been going on, as I say, for a long time. We welcome people to contribute in a variety of ways. Of course, money helps. And we have been needing to get back to being positive, although we aren't in any danger of running out of money at the moment. What I want to make sure people recognize is that you can go on our website and look at jobs, and there's a newsletter, and we have a consultants directory. There's a new Birds of a Feather meeting that's going to be starting about careers in user interface, and that's going to be headed by Edwin Lee, our vice chair. And we welcome, of course, volunteers. So please look on the website and you'll see volunteer opportunities. Probably my favorite thing is looking at old videos of all of the things, all the fantastic people that have spoken in the past. While I'm not sure what the meeting will be on in a month, it's quite likely it'll be a retrospective of what it was like for Marvin and Marvin Minsky to in his life, told by Margaret and Gloria Minsky, who had a lot to do with a lot of the ideas that he had, but also Margaret's a notable professor in HCI. So with that all said, I'd like to turn this over to Nancy Frishberg, who will introduce tonight's program.
Let's see. Yes, I thought I was unmuted. Thank you for that nice introduction, Ted, and welcome to BayChi, everybody. And I'm delighted to have all of you present while I get to have a conversation with my friend Shawn Lan. I haven't talked to Shawn for weeks and weeks, months and months, years even. I don't think we've spoken much since you went off to Zoom after leaving Financial Engines, where we were both employed. We overlapped from 2013 to 15, I think. Were you there after 15? No.
14.
Shawn, you left in 14, right? Okay. I promise I'm not going to show all those photos of you dressed up like angry birds, okay? Unless you beg me.
I beg you not.
We had many wonderful affiliative activities at our workplace where they celebrated any kind of a holiday. It was great, and many opportunities for people to share experiences. But Halloween, one time, our team dressed up like angry birds. So that's not what everybody has come to find out. What they want to know is, how the heck did this happen? We heard a little bit about Zoom, and then, I heard about Zoom because you went there. And so I was tracking it, but I don't know for the rest of our audience how early they had heard about Zoom. And what I remember, and please correct me, is that you already knew some of the people who were starting this business. and several of you had been working together previously. Is that right?
Yes, actually, most of them. We used to work at Cisco together.
And so what were you doing at Cisco? Everybody was on WebEx?
Yes, we actually were part of the software group, which is actually the previous WebEx. After Cisco has acquired it, but I think I joined the group that was mainly focused on WebEx products.
And that was your first job out of university, right?
It's, yes, for more than 5 years.
Wow. So you spent 5 years at Cisco. That was a big company. And then you left because, why did you end up coming over? Because John recruited you?
No, it was me. I think at the time Cisco has a lot of movement for the products, for the upper management. So every twice year, there's a new management team joining the company, and they would, just redo the product and then give it a new name. So it was very frustrating for people who were inside, spending all those time building stuff, and then just learned, oh, we're not going to publish those. So it was a pretty frustrating experience for me, especially in the last 2 years. But it's just for our group. I'm not sure about other Cisco BU. So at that moment, I was like, no, I can't stay here for one more day. So I heard my previous manager, John. So I heard he went to Financial Engines, and then he's starting to building the team there. So at that time, I was like, get me out of here as soon as possible. So I want to spend my time in a more valuable way to really help the company to make some valuable stuff. So that was the moment that I decided to go to Financial Engines.
Okay,
but
good.
Funny story is, I think right after I joined Financial Engines for a week, Eric, the founder of Zoom, reached out to me asking whether you would like to join Zoom. But I have already joined Financial Engines, so I said, well, I made my commitment. I couldn't change right now, but we'll see what happens later. So that's 1 year later, 2014. I left the Financial Engines to join Zoom.
Got it. Okay. And so you and Eric and the other people who were founding people at Zoom must have had a good idea of what was lacking in the video conferencing tools at that time. So what were the big overarching issues that you felt like none of these companies has solved properly?
I think for me, a little bit more about like, why did I join Zoom? Why do I join a startup that was not promising at all at that time? It's because I trusted the people I used to work with. I know how great they are. They have been in the industry for a long time, and they have been solely focused on that collaboration and video collaboration, audio collaboration. So I know if they come out to build something, I can trust the technology to be great. So it is because I trust the team, then I decided to join with them. I think from my perspective, I was more like, I really want to do something, the same like driving forces for me to join Financial Engines. The same thing that same reason why I joined Zoom is I want to do something, and I want to be able to help the company to build something great. So at that time, I didn't think about what kind of problems the company was trying to solve, but more about the team that I'm trusting. But later on, I think from my perspective, that's my understanding that Zoom is, compared to WebEx, is not trying to solve a new problem, but is trying to solve the problem or the same problem or similar problem with a different solution. And that solution comes when the technology matures, like video. If you're talking about video 20 years ago, there just isn't much. WebEx was also including video in the conferencing, but nobody are using it. Even us, like people who is inside building the product, doesn't want to use it. And then the funny thing is, every meeting, there's always one person trying to promoting the video, who is the PM of the video. But Zoom is, I think when Zoom was founded, first is the infrastructure needs to be rebuilt to support the video, because previous WebEx was based on online audio meetings, right? In order to do it based on the video platform, you have to redo everything. So this team was aiming to do that, while I think the timing was also good because the network bandwidth was increasing. People are using mobile devices more than before. Before it was just laptops, right? And then the mobile start. Apple introduced the iPhone, and then the touchable mobile devices has been swarming into the market. And that all of those has, I think, resulted in Zoom being the right product at that time to actually join the market.
Okay. So then talk about your own goals. I mean, you're saying you want to be part of the team and you had great confidence in other people that you were working with. You must have had some kinds of design goals at the early stages. How did you frame those for yourself, even if not for the rest of the group?
At that time, I wouldn't say I have more like design goals, but more about I want to help a company that maybe need a lot of help with the designs. So that the moment I joined Zoom, Eric was saying, "Oh, I need someone to help me build the design team. So are you the right person to do it?" So at that time, I wasn't thinking too much about my design goals, but really the goal to help this company at that time. What does the company need? I think there's a lot of things I need to understand. What kind of stage they are, what kind of help they need. So it's more about helping the company to achieve what they need at that moment. And later on, I think I started to kind of get a better idea and trying to figure out, what kind of design goal from my perspective that I need to build for the team.
So you hired more designers before you even had that in-depth global view of what the design was going to be. Is that what you're saying?
Not necessarily. No, at the beginning, it was just me. I think one thing I really learned through this journey was how the scale of the company would change things. So, for example, if there are like 4 engineers working with me together, that's enough. We can work very smoothly. We get things done. We get things done quickly. It was very a smooth collaboration. But once there are 8 engineers or 16 engineers, and there's just me, then you start to feel the burden, and because you wouldn't be able to communicate as much as you were before, and you wouldn't have enough time to work on the designs at the same time. So then you start to see the problems. So I think a lot of problems are scaling problems. How do you scale the company? How do you scale the team? It's based on how much people you have, and how do you make sure by adding more people, you can actually get more things done. Because if you don't do things right, then more people doesn't mean that you have more efficiency. That's the time I think we started to hire people. But at that time, because I was also fresh into team management, so I actually made every probably junior manager would make the mistake is I hired a person. I think after 1 year I joined the company, and it wasn't the right fit after we hired him. And then it seems like there's a lot of conflict between his opinions and Eric's opinions, and I'm stuck in between. So it was a tough lesson for me that I have to fire the first person I hired in 2 weeks.
Wow. Yes, that's
so
very
that was tough, but I think it is this kind of a mistake that would really drive you to grow, to really start to rethink, what's your goal? Like you mentioned, what's your goal to build this team, right? Because before I wasn't even thinking about it. It's just me wants to do something. And now it's different. I have to figure out a way to involve other people together with me to make things happen. So at that moment is the moment I start to think more about, what's the team that I'm trying to build?
So what was the team you were trying to build at that point?
I think gradually I get an idea is how can I build a team that has a great design culture. So that's something that I actually learned a lot from Zoom. We can talk about the culture later. But from the design team, I really want to involve people with great talents, who had the passion to actually help the company to work on designs. I think passion is something I really admire when I see people for the work, because it is that passion that can drive you continue to make great things. This the passion that drive you to think, oh, it's not because of the product that I'm working on, it's because I'm owning the product and I want to make it better. And how do I make it better? They would actively think about that. So during the hiring process, I gradually summarized talent over experience, but not saying that experience is not important. It's just I'm trying to compare those two. At that time, if they are equally the same, which one would I pick? And then it's passion over talent. Also, not saying talent is not important, but if someone has enough talent but a lot more passion, it's more important than someone who has great talent but not much passion, right? So I think it's that passion I'm trying to find that can build this team to drive themselves. So for me, the goal is really not me managing people, but really them managing themselves to actually to get things done or to strive or for better products. So that was the goal that I gradually formed after I joined Zoom for several years.
Okay. So what kinds of design problems or user experience issues came up for you in the process of the 6 years that you have spent at Zoom? I mean, for example, I think there were a lot of things that you did here that were original, you know, the highlighting of who's speaking with the outline. How did you decide? I don't think that other conferencing systems had done that, and now they're copying you. What are some of the other things that Zoom introduced or brought to the front?
I think the first one is the mute unmute. It's just one tiny thing out there, but it is the most frequently used button in the whole UI. So before, I think we had this struggle at WebEx as well. This is not a new problem. The problem is always there. So the mute unmute, it actually stands for two problems. One is what I see as a status. And the second one is what I can do as an action.
Right.
So if you have one button and the struggle is how can I make it as a status, but as well as it tells people that you can click it to unmute or mute. So there had been many like design explorations, like, oh, you hover on this mute icon, it shows the slash, and when you unhover, it didn't. But there's a lot of complexity because, oh, after you mute yourself, then you have to think about, oh, I hover, it becomes unmuted, and then I unhover, it becomes muted. So there's a lot of complexity that made things harder to understand, especially for other users. If as designers you have to struggle, don't even think about the users, how they are going to suffer this. So we ended up with something that's really simple, is we just forget about this like dual status problem. We just do one thing, is showing the user the status. Once the user, and with the status, we also have the caption at the bottom. So if you see a microphone icon, at the bottom, it actually says mute. So if you think about those two, they don't add up together, right? It's not the mute icon, it's the status icon, but the mute is the action. So we kind of combine those two together because once the user click it once, they would know, okay, this is the mute icon. So they don't have to struggle anymore. So we try to keep it as the most minimal and simplest status, and not too complicated with any other, interactions or things. So that's actually working really well. So people don't have to guess what it means. They just tap on it.
Right. Okay. So this is an interesting issue, and one that we talked about earlier in the year, because you may be aware or not about Larry Tesler, who was a UX person of some renown, and he died late last year. And so we held a session recalling his career, which was all about getting rid of modes. And so here you had to deal with exactly that issue. you know, because the toggle switch means you're in a different mode. And so then how do you let the person know which one they're in, and on, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's one. I think I'll just give examples of the most obvious ones that people normally everyone would touch that point. The other one is the joint audio dialogue. Everyone struggles with it. I mean, when I say everyone, is every designer struggles with it. No matter it's at Zoom or at WebEx or other video providers, everyone struggles at it because it actually covers two major use cases, especially when Zoom built a product. It was targeting the business, right? Business users at the very beginning. So for business users, before they trust their phone system. So for like salespeople or for like support people, they have their own phone system, right? So whenever they join the meeting, they don't join through the computer. They join through their phone. So they either dialing or they call back at their number. So their audio will go through the phone to join the meeting. And later they would go to their laptop and then click the link and then join the data version, which has a screen that they can share a screen, right? So the audio is on their phone, but the content is on their laptop. But for other users, especially I think after Zoom has built the voice over IP, which is the technology term, but put it simple is how to use your computer audio, but for like the similar quality of the phone. So Zoom has done a lot of work. Like the audio team is amazing. They have done so much work because there's so many different use cases, how people are going to use their audio, different devices, so much complications. They have to consider all different cases and trying to build an audio system that can trying to be at the same quality as a phone system. So once we have passed that point, we started to see there are actually more and more users using the computer audio over the phone, even though there's still, plenty of users using the phone system. So on the UI, I don't know whether you have noticed but for, I think individual users, you don't have this problem because you don't have a phone system. I think there's only one action, which is join computer audio. But for business users, they constantly have to deal with two options. One is join with the computer audio, the other one is to join with the phone. And in the UI, it's hard for us because even though we know there are probably only 10% of users using the phone, but if you multiply 1 million users or 10 million users, that's actually more than 1 million users using the phone. And that's not a small base. We can't just say, oh, let's ditch it, not worry about it, or make it harder for those people to look for it. So we have to consider both, even if it is a 90-10 case, but because the user base is too much. So we constantly struggle, which is the primary UI, and how to make sure people who use the other system can still find their option, right? So there has been, if you ask me which UI has the most changes that we have made during the past 6 years that I was there, is this dialogue. We're constantly tweaking it. We're constantly searching for how people use it and trying to targeting individual use cases to prompt something. So the only user in that case would see it. And other users who are not, will not see it. So it's one UI in different cases has to show different interface. So that's the hard part, and that took lots of time as well. But as I think more and more people are using the computer audio, and we have seen the data soaring for the computer audio, it's constantly at 89 or 90%. So we also trying to say, hey, if that's the case, how can we make sure it is easy for those users to join the meeting without thinking about it? So that's the one button that we always put in the center and asking the user to click. But for the phone users, we actually have a lot more complications and individual use cases for them to find the option.
Yes, finding things, that's always fun. I know that one. So we have a bunch of questions that have come up, and maybe we'll step away from our prepared questions and take some of these
Sure.
spontaneous ones, okay?
Mhm.
Let me first make a meta comment about the display that all the individuals are seeing, because one of the questions in the chat is how to see just the two of us and not be looking at the slide. And the reason we're showing the slide is so that we can get automated captions. And that's an accessibility feature that's important to us, and that we've now figured out how to work around without a live captioner, although we know that a live captioner is the best quality and fidelity of the captioning. Well, we hope to return to live captioning at some point soon. But Dave, and I don't know which Dave this is, but somebody who's identified as Dave wants to limit the amount of space on his screen. And so I'm going to describe to him that vertical handle between the view. From my screen, it's the left side that's showing the slide and the captions, and the right side that's got the two of us in pictured. And if you drag that handle, that's the bar between those two sides, you can increase the size of the people talking and decrease the size of the captions in the slide. So I don't know whether Dave knew about that already. All right, so here I want to draw attention to, as long as we're talking about accessibility, to the question from Jane Shurek, who's a friend of ours. And she says, I love that Zoom now allows the sharing of a mobile device, but I do UX texting, or I think she means testing, with people with disabilities. And when we have a blind participant using a screen reader, either iOS or Android, we cannot get screen reader audio to come across into the meeting. Have you heard about this problem?
I haven't.
Okay.
But I think there are people with accessibility needs might have encountered different problems. And I think Zoom really cares about accessibility because we have a lot of education users and government users. So there might be, if there are still problems over there, I think the team is probably on the way to addressing it, or we should reach out to the team and letting them know that there are problems with accessibility users in this use case. Because I think when you're building softwares, it's really hard to know how people are going to use it. So our initial intention of getting mobile users on this is, oh, you can join meeting easily wherever you are. But now a lot of people are actually going out there using Zoom for user testing. So that's a different use case, and that requires more, I think, research into it to understand how they use it and how much trouble they are having, especially with accessibility. So I think that's something we need to reach out to the Zoom team. Since now I'm not with Zoom anymore, I can't make commitment for them. But I think we can reach out together. If you need my help, I can reach out to people who are still there to look into this.
That sounds great. And Jane, I wanted you to know, and anybody else who's interested in this accessibility issue, that just today on one of the other lists I'm on, there was a notice that there is a opening at Zoom for an accessibility specialist. And Shawn and I were talking ahead of the meeting, and we're hoping that it's going to turn into more than one accessibility specialist because there's so many different aspects to accessibility. So Joe Fish is asking the question, which is the $1 billion question in the chat. I don't know if you saw that, Shawn. It says, why do you think Zoom became the preferred video chat of the pandemic over WebEx, video, Skype, BlueJeans, Teams, and all the various incarnations of Google's Meet, Jitsi, et cetera, Hangout?
That could be a $10 billion question, but put it aside. I think I would say start from the beginning. So the journey of Zoom at the very beginning is the team is really focused on the product. So at the beginning, we didn't do much marketing. That's why a lot of users, like Nancy mentioned, oh, I haven't heard of Zoom until the pandemic happens. So I think in the early years, the team is really focused on product. When I say product, is really trying to get the video quality, get the audio quality to be the best. And it's not just when you say best, you can't just say, hey, it's the best. you have to be based on the actual devices, your Mac, your Windows devices, your iOS, your Android devices. I think all those devices, and each device has, older version of the phone, more advanced version of the phone, the laptop with more CPU, GPU powers, and the other ones don't. So you have to consider what's best for each device. So that's how much efforts the Zoom team, the engineering team, has been putting on those different devices to make sure they can maximizing the performance on that device. So if you are on a poor network, the team will say, oh, how do I minimize the use of the video bandwidth, and trying to make sure the audio is great, because without audio, even you have perfect video, it's not going to work because people can not hear you. So this is just one simple example, but how to optimize the power that we use for each device is really the hard part. And because the team has spent so much time on those, and when the product is ready and we start to marketing it just seems so natural that people start to use it, because I think for companies, they have their IT professionals, right? They would compare literally 20 plus products on the market to see which one has the best quality, which one is the most stable one. And Zoom is literally beating everyone on the market. So is that stability?
You're talking about all kinds of performance issues, which is great.
Performance.
But I'm trying to figure out how the design and the performance are interacting with each other. And how did they know that, and what kind of research program did you have? I'm going to put that one in there too.
Okay, not sure that's related to the exact the question that Dave asked.
Right. Okay.
But yeah, I was just trying to say, it's because the product is ready. So when you start to market it, people feel like, oh, I can use it right away. I don't have to struggle, even though I understand there are still people struggling with different technical issues. But in general, I think the major public would find it, oh, this is a more stable solution than the other ones. So that's why I think when something like pandemic, we don't want it to happen, even though it helped Zoom, but we don't want it to happen. But when it happens, I think the public would acknowledge, oh, which one is the best product on the market that can help them at that moment. So I think that's why Zoom stands out over all the other solutions. But on the other side is, this is for business users, but on the other side, there are also lots of individual users using Zoom. I think people think Zoom is simple and easy to use. And that is a concept. So the concept is, oh, one click of the link, you're in a meeting. So is that concept make people feel like, oh, that's really simple? I think from the UI perspective, like I mentioned before, the audio issue, right? How people choose which audio to join, I think is still a problem on the mobile devices. But I think the team is on the way, at least before I left, is on the way to addressing those issues as well. So is that simplicity that make the individual users also feel like, oh, it's easy to use and it seems very stable over the other solutions. So they would intend to use this. And also is, I think the needs of individual users are growing as well. They are not limited to be, oh, I only have a video chat. Maybe sometimes I want to share something with my family. Maybe I want to, do something together with them. And then the traditional, consumer level video solutions wouldn't be able to satisfy that. So I think Zoom has more powerful features that's simple enough for them to get into, to explore. That's why I think during the pandemic, I think the company really focused on how to help the end users, individual users, to leverage Zoom to stay connected. And to be honest, I think from the business perspective, the cost for individual users, it's much higher than that for all the business users, because Zoom are doing it for free, right? So basically, Zoom is burning money for free users to be able to use it. And also, I think we put a lot of new features, as you can see, the filters, the makeups, all of those things. They are not really for business use cases, right? Those actually has been added because we want people to stay connected, and we want them to feel it's happy. They're happy. I think that's part of the company slogan. Inside the company, the slogan is delivering happiness. I think that's the culture that the company is trying to push. I think, well, since we talk about the culture, maybe I'll add a little bit more on that. Um, it might sound like, oh, delivering happiness. I don't know. It seems too simple to remember that, but once you start to believe in it, especially inside the company, we have been seeing such a huge positive energy inside the company because of that. I think once people believe in that, they're really trying to make each other happy and help each other, not just for the sake of, oh, I'm trying to do everything to make you happy, but from work wise, if someone's in trouble, there's always a team to support them, to help them. And if they have, sometimes even personal issues, there's a team behind them to help them, to kind of comfort them as well. So it's that kind of culture of delivering happiness as well as caring has, I think, carried a lot of momentum inside the company. I've been hearing, because I'm an insider, the insider don't feel as strong as people who are joining the company. And they would tell you, wow, this is the environment that I've been so fresh to. And everyone, since I joined, everyone in the company is so nice to me. And everyone is just trying to help me. And they feel overwhelmed with that warmth. So that's kind of that feeling from an outsider would actually tell us insiders how much this has been working. So I think that culture, that's why even Eric, he said, what's the most important thing? He said it's the culture. The culture, especially when the whole company grows, the culture would actually help to hold people together, steer towards the same direction the company is trying to executing. It's easier to do it when you have less people, right? But more people joining, you would have different situations, and how do you hold everyone together? I think that's the culture.
Thank you. So I'm going to change the subject slightly. And you had said earlier that business users were your first use case. So that was the first audience you were trying to satisfy. And then during this past year, and I understand you were only there for part of the year, but the increased population of school users and education in general, I think, has been terrific. And did that influence, did that have an impact on the design team before you left? And how so?
It does. I think it influenced a lot on, during, I think when I was still there, Zoom had a crisis with the security issues, because we made it so easy. Well, it's easy for regular users. It's also easy for people, hackers who are trying to ruin other people's meetings, right? So actually during that time, Eric made a commitment that we're going to put a 90-day period just to focus on security and stop everything else. So that's just how big that commitment is, trying to solve no, I wouldn't say all of the issues, but all the major issues that we have experienced. So if you look at the product, there was a security, or I don't know whether they have changed the name, but there was a separate button just for security for the host to control like what level of this meeting that the other attendees can get into the meeting, or whether they can share, or whether they can send a video. So so we have put a lot of efforts, because we have realized that there are people who are trying to hurt others, and they're trying every different ways to get into the meeting to do that. So we spent a lot of time just within that period, completely focused on that to address those issues. So that's a big change, because that actually it's related to another kind of philosophy or design philosophy that we have, is how to keep the product simple. We want simplicity, but it's really hard when you have thousands of features needed to be adding to the product. So if you look at interface that we have for the meeting, if you started using the first version, it wasn't much different compared to the version you are using today. we're really trying to keep the basic experience simple to the user. So we always know there aren't, not all the users are using Zoom every day. There will be some users, oh, maybe I use it several times a month, right? Or once a week. And for those users, you can't expect them to remember everything, right? So that simplicity, when they get into that interface, it's really important. They should always be able to know, oh, this is what I do, and that I just did it, right, to join the meeting. So that interface hasn't changed, and we haven't actually added a single button to the default interface. Well, I mean, user can always add more into it by themselves, but the default interface has been like that for 8+ years since Zoom was founded. So that's just how much commitment we have been to stick to that design philosophy, to keep the most important interface familiar to those users. So, but back to this, we added the security button. You can see how important that is and how much commitment we have made to it.
Okay. So where, I'm looking for the security button now. Let's see. I'm not sure where it is, but I won't worry about it.
Or maybe, that's why I said, maybe the name has been changed.
Right. This is webinar also. This isn't a meeting. So I don't know whether it had, right. So it may not have that same security feature because the act of registering gives us some of those security features, registering ahead.
Webinar has much more controls for the host than a regular meeting host by default.
Right. And because we had a poor experience, it was April or May, and there was rampant Zoom bombing going on. We got bombed our first time out. And so then we switched over to webinar so that we could manage the registrants better. Although I know that it's frustrating for people not to be able to text to one another or chat within the app to one another. Because they can't all see one another, except if they speak up in the chat. So one person mentions here that the security issues of Zoom made my company ban the app. We use IBM instead. So that's an interesting thing. And then, right, okay. So let's see, have we talked to us about your design team and how you selected them? I know you already talked about passion over talent, talent over experience, or, you know, if you had to make a forced choice. And so what kinds of backgrounds? Were they all from design or user experience backgrounds? Did they come, were they subject matter experts? For example, somebody says, do you have any kindergarten teachers or teachers on your team or advising your design team?
We don't have kindergarten teachers yet. But as for the background, all the majors that our team members are graduated from, it's actually very interesting. I think a lot of them are not from design majors. So we have people from mechanical engineering. We have people from chemistry major. I think we used to have someone from math major as well. So I think that's why I said the passion is more important, is because one thing I see in those people, even though they had the mechanical engineering degree, bachelor degree, they spend so much time, their actual time, to do designs because they found the passion there and they love doing it. And you can see they're doing this so intensely that they can surpass people with like limited 2 years of exposure to designs than those people who may be in the industry for more than 3 years. So it's that's why I said that passion really drives those people to be like doing great and have great designs, have great minds, to allow them to actually get into this industry. So it is their work that speak for them. It's not their major. So I think that's what I found in a lot of our team members, especially at the very beginning. I would say in the first 3 years of hiring, I would just say it's miserable because for a startup company that, like Nancy mentioned, a lot of people don't know about your name, right? and they don't know much about a business collaboration tool, because everyone uses consumer level tools, right? Use Facebook Messenger, use Instagram, they use Airbnb, they use other things, all of those things that they know every day, but not everyone is using a business video chatting tool. So it's, I think, either from a product perspective or from a brand perspective, it's hard to get really great people into the team. So at that time, I personally, I have to do a lot of work trying to recruit people individually by myself. So I would, go to the website that either LinkedIn or there are some design website like Dribble, or other websites that designers are there showing their work. Um, I literally have to go there and then sorting and then filtering and see, oh, who might be a good fit for our team. That's one way to reach out to people, and that's very hard. But it turns out the result is pretty good, because that I have to manually select those people. So you have a bigger pool than those people who are applying to your positions directly. So you got to see more people with more talents, like what I mentioned, mechanic, engineer, or chemistry. Those are, just different majors you probably wouldn't look into through a regular way. But if you have talked to them and you have seen their work, you would have much better understanding. So glad that I have survived through the first few years to get the foundation of the team. And now it's, I would say, the time before I left, it's much easier because it's a well-known brand. That almost everyone has used the product. Can't see all everyone, but almost. So it's really easy to recruit people from both perspective, and it almost becomes overwhelming because there are too many applications that sometimes we have to put on hold of that position after publishing it for 2 weeks.
Mm. So I'm that's very interesting. I like knowing that that you did the hand sort through Dribble of finding good people. You may not realize, and this is another thing we don't advertise well enough, Bekai has a job bank. So it's free to employers, and it allows you access to all the people on the Bekai job bank list, many of whom are well qualified and some of whom are looking for a job all the time. So next time you can come and check the Bekai job bank, right?
Yeah, I think I know that through you, Nancy, but it seems like you didn't do enough
I have to keep
advertisement to me.
I'm noticing there are a couple different questions that are related to this trade-off between user experience in the user experience, between simplicity on the one hand, so fewer controls, and then there's another one that's consistency with platform conventions. And so, for example, somebody has an example here where it says items in the gallery view don't have the standard Windows maximize controls. And so that could be confusing for some users. Somebody else mentioned that the raise the hand feature here got moved recently, appears. And how important is learnability in your design, decision making? How do you test for that? So we're doing that trade-off about conventionalization according to different platforms and simplicity according to your standards. You can wax poetic for us.
Yeah, I think probably you already heard of this, is the designers like making changes and users like new things, but normally users hates the decisions design made the changes. So it's a loop, but I think when that happens, it's normally we're not thinking from the users using experiences or they're using flow, right? So for example, I think for those users who said the raise hand was there before, and now because we are maybe adding more features that we call reactions or meeting reactions, then we group it together with the other reactions. And that's why it might all of a sudden disappears from its previous position. So that's the kind of, I can definitely feel that if someone cannot find it, and then how frustrated they are, just because we think it was supposed to be grouped with others. So if you build it in day one, you have no problem because users started from there. But if you build it in the middle way, then you have to struggle. Really think about this, how much you change the interface, because sometimes you have to, there isn't an option for you, because if you don't change it, then certain new things wouldn't be able to be added. So for this very specific example, I would say we probably didn't have enough time to really think through this. If we had more time, I was, well, normally we don't. But
There's never enough time.
we should, I think the balance to between these changes that you make and the new things the user likes is really how to have a way to guide the user to get there, or it's really easy for them to think, oh, it gets there. So for what you mentioned about this maximize button, right, to go to the full screen, I think that's the same thing. It's actually also something we have, but we didn't build it out right there. So you can find it, but it's very minor and it's not together with the it depends on which view the user are. So the really complex thing here we are dealing with is if a user is in a regular window view, or if they're in a regular window view but in the gallery view, or if they're in the full screen view in a gallery view, or if they're in the full screen view with the what we call a thumbnail view, which you have the floating panels, right?
Right.
So all of them are, if you look at them, they're actually very different. And the user could get confused. How come I was in the regular view, it was videos at the top and the big video at the bottom, and all of a sudden in the full screen view, they're on the side, right? So that's kind of the inconsistency, even though that we think, oh, just think from a view perspective, this might be the best for you to view the big active speaker as well as seeing the other people. But from a transition perspective, it's not working for the user. So I think those are the things that we have been considering from an overall structural perspective, to compare all the different layouts and really picking out what are those inconsistencies and what we should do to actually tweak them. So there's a lot of work to do for those as well. Those are consistency across platforms. And also if you compare the layout on the iPad or the layout on the mobile, they might be slightly different than the layout you are seeing on the laptop, right? And some of them are very different.
Right.
So so there's one thing about platform consistency, but there's also another thing about how to optimize for each product, because the iPhone screen, the way you are holding the phone, the distance you are dealing with the phone is different from the distance you are dealing with the iPad. It may be different from the distance you are dealing with the laptop or even a TV, right? So we have to really think about during that experience, what might be the best for the user. And we have to think about, which user might be using which devices together. Because you might be using your phone and your laptop, and that might be an 80-20 split of frequency of how much you use it, right? But how often does a user using a laptop and switch it with an iPad? So, or switching between iPad and the iPhone. So we have to consider all those different cases and really think about, what's the primary use case that the user would be using it, and really optimizing for that. And then on top of that, considering how much consistency we can have across platforms. Because if we only talk about consistency, and then it's going to suffer on some platforms. So we have to think about both how to optimize for that device as well as how to be consistent with other platforms. If consistency cannot be reached, I'd rather optimize for that platform over consistency, because if a user is using a device, you're telling them it's different from the laptop, they wouldn't care.
So how do you know they don't care? So for example, did you do user testing, anything like what we used to do at Financial Engines? Did you have designers doing the testing or somebody else? Or how did you collect data about people's successes and feedback to you?
Yeah, there are actually in the early stage, we already had so many different ways of feedback from our users. So we didn't actually do all active researching on like what does the user need or how they use it, because we have been overwhelmed with all those feedback they are sending us. So one is from
Very
our
generous
support
of
team.
them. Very generous.
Yes, very generous. Yeah. So the support team is one big source of user feedback. And then there are feedback that collected from maybe the PMs or from the salespeople. Well, actually, most of the salespeople come back with requirement, not feedback. But some of them do. And we also hold, I think, annually user advisory board as well. So on those board, they're selected customers for that board, but they would also give us a lot of high level feedback, lower level feedback. So those different ways. And also we have the send feedback through the product. So we actually received a lot of from those as well. So I think the best thing that a product can have is user sending you feedback. That actually has helped us improving the product as well as discovering what kind of new things the user need. So I saw a chat correcting me about the voice over IP. I got distracted.
That's okay.
So back to where I got distracted here.
Whoa, we just lost you. There you are. Okay.
No, yeah, very good.
So I think you gave enough of an answer there. I'm disappointed that there isn't a huge user research team, but I think you're getting lots of good feedback and making use.
Oh yes, sorry, I was disconnected for a moment about that topic.
My favorite.
Yes, regarding. So a lot of user research that we do is through internal testing. So we would reach out to teams not from the product, because those we know enough about the product, right? So we will reach out to people in the finance team, marketing team, HR team, other teams who are using it, less familiar with the product. And then we have some new things or existing things. We would actually go to them for internal testing. As for, I think the more deeper user research, really, I think dig into the personas or like the user images. We haven't done much about that, to be honest.
Okay.
But as the company grows, I think more work needs to be done regarding this perspective.
So one person asks, why can't meetings and webinars just be seamless infrastructure changes under the hood? And we shouldn't have to be aware of them.
I think we actually we talk about it inside Zoom as well.
Yeah.
I think the hard part is not about whether we want or not, but it's the technology that supports it. So if you think about webinar, we have limited two-way interactions, right? So only the panelists can be interacted with us. But for the audience, they only receive one-way streaming. So if you think about the structure is limited panelists with two-way, and then the major one is one-way. Because if you think about the webinar, it's targeting large audience. Even though you can use it for small audience as well, but the main goal is targeting the major audience. And also because we are keep increasing the total number of people you can include in a meeting. I think about before we have 25 and all the other solutions are providing 8. Now they have been forced to add to 25. And now we have increased that to be 100 by default, right? And the large meeting you can get to 500. I think certain ones per request, you can get even to 1,000 or 2,000.
Right.
But that's two-way interaction. So the technical side of building two-way interaction of how to optimize the performance is different from how we do with the webinar, with majorly one-way interaction. So that's why it wouldn't be able to so smoothly transition between those two different platforms. But I think Zoom is also trying to do something to optimize the structure for the webinar. if you think about it before, in order to change one attendee, for example, right now, if we have an attendee who wants to ask a question, they can only send chat. But Zoom has changed the platform backend structure to allow you to easily move them into the meeting temporarily. So they can show their video, they can show their audio, they can ask the question temporarily, and when they finish, they can go back to their previous status. So this is also a huge change to the backend structure to the webinar.
Got it.
And,
right.
Yeah.
Now, I was noticing a couple of questions here or comments, and I'm going to see if I can find it again. Okay, Lisa was talking in the questions here about she tried to use Zoom last term to create a collaborative illustration and real-time animation project, but they found that Zoom's idea of simultaneity was really different from theirs. They hoped that they'd be able to see the screen filled with squares of each artist's live work. So watch them while they're working on it versus their headshot. And so the simultaneous screen display really didn't, allow them to do that. So have you thought of some of these other scenarios of interaction? Because you're talking about it for collaboration purposes, right? You're saying Zoom is a platform for collaboration. And I love that as a business slogan and also a way to frame what kind of product you're working on. So if we're really collaborating, what kinds of capabilities do we each have?
So just to recap on what this user has asked. So she's saying, or he's saying, that they want artists to be able to show their work instead of...
Let me license Lisa to talk so that she can ask it herself. How about that? Go ahead, Lisa. I think you're allowed.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Nancy. Thank you.
Hey.
Thanks. Yes, so what we had tried to do was each artist was working on something actively. And we wanted to be able to see in those little squares, instead of seeing each artist's headshot, to be able to, for them to share their screen. For example, if they're drawing on an iPad, they would display their iPad, and maybe I and another artist would display our iPads. And what you'd see in the gallery view is, instead of seeing everybody's headshot, you'd see each person's artwork. And we ended up doing this and hacking this by using Jamboard and doing it that way. But that's what we had originally wanted. And in fact, Zoom sent us some angel to help us try to get this going, but we could not make it work.
I see. Yeah. Now I understand. I think she wants to share multiple contents through the grid view instead of the videos.
Exactly. Yes. So I wanted to know, what was the concept, though, of simultaneous screen display that you had? Because I know you incorporated it and integrated that, but I never, I want to know what was the concept, since it was very different from ours.
Not sure when you say simultaneous screen display. So what Zoom had been, I think we have been doing things based on user feedback. So it's great that we're hearing, well, even though I'm not with Zoom, but it's great always to hear from the users of their use cases, because that forces us to think, how do I cover those use cases? Even though we have maybe more major use cases, but if our infrastructure can support it, why not let the user have a way to do it, right? So what we had before is you can share multiple contents with other people. For example, that use case, we actually did it for engineering, and it's very deep, hidden. So it allows you to share multiple people to share at the same time, but that requires you to have multiple screens. So the use case is code review. So the engineers would do code review together. So you review my code, I'll review your code. Instead you share and then stop, and then I share. You can review at the same time. So that's the simultaneous code review that allows you to leverage multiple displays to do that. I think it's up to, well, actually, I don't remember the number, how much displays it can support, but normally it's 2 or 3. So
Okay.
to support your case, I think it's much different than what they're doing, or it's much more than what they're doing. I could even imagine that you might have 10 artists you want
Oh, yeah.
to see each other's work at the same time, right?
Yes, we had 25 artists working on this. Yep.
Oh, well, at least it fits into one view if we support that. So I think, yeah, sometimes, just to be honest with you, it's not always easy to adopt or every single feedback into the product, because I think from the product, you have to also make the sacrifice on, oh, which one that is our major use case, and whether we can support a little bit more corner cases based on the same structure. But if it is too much different than what we are doing, then it may not be able to get into it. Not saying that we don't want to do it, but it's just not enough. There's not enough priority to work on that.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks, Lisa. So I want to go into the land of speculation a little bit. What do you think is going to knock Zoom off its current high point? What capability would somebody have to have in their product that would outshine Zoom?
The way I think about this is, as I mentioned before, the problem is there. The problem doesn't change much. Is human needs, right? People need a way to communicate. And before it was audio, now it's video. Next, it's not a product that's just slightly better than Zoom or can do a little bit more than Zoom, but I think that needs to be something way different. So a different platform that maybe, we talk about this may not be realistic, but telecommute, maybe something, or what we call it, telepresence. It used to be a Cisco's name, is allow you to see people in 3D in the same environment you are in, right? So
Right.
I was thinking about something that revolutionary like that, not just another product that's similar or has been slightly better on certain ways to knock them off. But I think from Zoom perspective, also a video is a platform, right? So before it's a product, but the more you think about it, it's the platform of ways people communicate. And on top of that, it's just like in person. You can do way more collaborations together in person, and you should be able to do that through the online platform as well. So on that platform, you should be able to do way more things. I think Zoom is trying other things as well, to explore potentially other ways to increase the landscape of the Zoom.
Okay, so now you've been away from Zoom for 6 months roughly, right? And
7 months almost.
7 months. Okay, good.
Yes.
And are you settling on what you might do next? Are you going to give us a little peek into what you're thinking about for your next adventure?
I think I have a direction. I always have a direction, but the way to go to that direction, I don't know who or which company I might meet that would help me to be part of it. But I think in general, I was designer, and I always have the design soul. So what I would love to do is really see what kind of company can value design and can leverage design to make great products and then run great businesses. I think there's a lot of opportunities out there. To be honest, there are so many companies, they don't need good designs to survive or even to thrive, right? You can see out there are plenty of them out there. But if there's someone who can do both, and then they might be able to overturn them. So I think that that company really embraces design and values it and can use it as the power to make a great products. I think that would be something I'm really interested into. And the other thing is also, I think personally, I love new technology. So if there are certain things that's revolutionary technology that I want to be part of it, but through anyway, I don't know. But that's kind of the things I would like to be part of as well.
All right. Well, we'll be looking forward to seeing which direction you take. I'm going to go back and give you just a couple more questions. And if there are other ones that people in the chat or in the Q&A feel like I haven't touched on enough, say it again, and we'll see if we get there. One of the things that somebody brought up is Zoom fatigue. We didn't have that term before, right? And did you guys anticipate that with so much remote collaboration that we would start feeling this Zoom fatigue from looking at the screen for so long?
Well, I don't know whether it's a Zoom fatigue or just the screen fatigue.
Screen fatigue, I don't know. Maybe it's Zoom is so popular it got blamed for the phenomenon.
It could be, yeah. But I think from Zoom's perspective, it's trying to help. But I think I haven't thought about that term before.
Really?
Since you mentioned it. I think yes, if this situation continues, I don't know about, I've been staying at home before I started traveling for like over, I think 7 months. And it's hard because you stay with the kid in the house, and they have plenty of energy to spend, and you need to work at the same time, and you wouldn't be able to go to other places. I think that's tough. And even though that people think, oh, this is a new way of collaboration, but I think this is not a new way of living, right? So people could feel frustrated in this situation, and they might, because of that, they might blame anything that's together with that situation for it. So that's just my perspective on this.
Oh yeah, I agree. I don't think it's Zoom's fault that there's Zoom fatigue. I think it's the fault of the situation we're in, and whoever's product would be doing it likely would have the same effect. But it's hard to know. There's let's see. Dave has this question about latency reduction, and there's another question about hybrid environments. So let's not forget that one too. So Dave says, if I remember correctly, WebEx has or had a dedicated network to reduce latency. Does Zoom have this too, or is it no longer necessary?
So it might be too technical for me, but I'll try to comprehend this. So when you say a network or dedicated network, do you mean a private cloud, or I'm not sure exactly what it was referring to.
Dave, I'm allowing you to talk.
Sure.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
So if I remember right, it was a dedicated network backbone. So you would still use your ISP to connect to the initial connection, but then there was some dedicated backbone that was just a WebEx backbone. And the theory of that was that it allowed, shorter latency so you could have a conversation more easily.
Yeah, actually, I wasn't familiar with that. I think from Zoom's perspective, there are plenty of database across the different countries. So I think it's trying to use the closest one for that connection. So I don't know whether that answers your question, but yeah, as for me, I haven't heard of something like a kind of private network backbone.
Okay.
Thank you. Now there was another question, and somebody was asking, I'm going to see if I can find it. This kind of trade-off that we are getting now with COVID and being forced to be on remote communications all the time, audio, video, or whatever. And so we're hoping, I think all of us, that we will be able to see one another again, shake hands, give a hug,
Yes.
and actually be in real space together. But I know that this has, I said this to you and I said this to several other people. I had been trying to get the date worked out with you, and we finally had agreed on January. And then you told me you weren't going to be back in January. And my head is so locked into this meeting being a physical meeting. I thought, are we going to have to reschedule again? And then I realized, of course, it doesn't matter. Okay, you're 14 hours ahead of us. Big deal. You can be here anyway and speak to us from the future, right? And so you never thought about it that way, did you? So anyway, we're trying to figure out now. Let's imagine that we're going to be in a more hybrid situation again, where some people will be remote and some people will be physically present. Do you think that Zoom is going to be able to help, adapt so that we can be effective with both kinds of audiences? And I know that there's some colleagues of mine, even before I met you, who say, if you're going to have one person be remote, everybody should be remote. So you equalize it rather than give privilege to the 6 people in the room, and the 17 people who are not in the room are always feeling like they're missing the inside conversation. I don't know whether Zoom has tried to address this or think in the future about that.
Yeah, I'll think about the second one actually first. I think when you say, oh, someone is not in the room, they feel like they have less privilege compared to the people in the room. I do feel that, especially even in the working environment as well. Think about a use case that maybe 8 people are in the conference room, they're discussing, and then there are 2 other people who's online. And there are some, connections, either it's eye contact or like the gesture, right? Or, just moving things around, shuffling things around in the room. Those wouldn't be accessed by those people online. So in that sense, yes, it seems like online people do have less access to that real meeting. But on the contrary, I would also think if you don't even have the online participants, those people may not even be able to join the meeting. So depends on what you're comparing, right? If you're comparing that someone don't have access and now they can have access, even though that's less, but that's way more than they had before. Same for the education, right? So if, for example, some of the top universities can open up the online courses for people like in Africa or like less developed countries, they would be able to join online to actually have access, at least part of the access to those contents of those education. That would be fantastic. So I think depends on which perspective you are thinking about this and who is the real audience. If you are saying that the audience are all local and some people they join online and some people join in person, yes, they would have less access to those people. I do feel there's something missing for those online participants. And to your point about if you have one person online, it's better everyone's online. I think that does apply to a company strategy. For example, there are companies who started online or remote, and they have been remote for everyone, no matter how many employees they have. I think they have built a culture that allows that and enables that, or even empowers that. So I think that's great. But if you have half employees in the office and the other half online, especially some of them are in the same department, I do think there might be some problems going on with that.
Yeah, I'll be interested to look back on these days, 5 or 10 years hence, and see what we're actually doing. So do you think we're going to be getting involved in mixed reality and augmented reality through Zoom meetings?
I hope so. Maybe.
Any plans in the works that you want to mention to us?
Not yet. I haven't figured out yet. I think it's for me, after Zoom, I think is that a stage for me to really think about what I want to do later. And to be honest, I'm lost. because I'm searching for directions. Well, I'm searching for potential ways. The direction is there, but I don't know on the way there who I might meet. So that's why it's good to be lost in this case.
I got it. No, that's great that you
Mhm.
have this opportunity to explore and to, to take some time off and really think about what you want to be when you grow up, right?
Mhm. Yep.
Uh, Somebody asked why you're no longer at Zoom, and I think I get it. It was enough. It was intense.
No, it's not because of that. I think for me, I wouldn't be able to stay this way, like not doing much for long.
Uh-huh.
I like being intense.
Okay.
So I think there are multiple reasons for why do I leave Zoom. From me, personally, it's all about growth and learning. So if I feel like that something is more certain, or I already know, like, oh, how to get there, it becomes less interesting for me. So I want to explore something else. Or if I feel like there's not enough growth, or there is growth, but it's not high rate growing, or is less than what I had before, then I'm looking to something else. So I think it's all about that.
Great. Well, I'm glad you're looking out for your growth. That's wonderful. We've got 7 more minutes. Let's see. Has anybody got another question they want to ask, or shall I give you back 7 minutes of your life?
Wow, wonderful.
I think we hit most of the questions that people brought up, if not exactly in those words. So here, I know one that we had on our list that we didn't get to yet. How well do you feel that your schooling prepared you for what you've been through in the last 6 years?
Oh, I think back to that. Um, it's not about how much the school has been preparing you, but more about how much the environment the school can provide you. I think a school is an environment of people doing similar things that give you different ideas of how you can do it. But as for how you do it, it still rely on yourself. That's why I was referring to those hirings who were, in different majors, but ended up doing designs.
Right.
So I think, yeah, well, for me, I think passion would be the thing that drive you to think about what's next for you, not the school itself.
Good. Okay. So your school encouraged you to think.
So my school was in Shanghai. At that time, was one of the top design colleges. But at that time, so there wasn't much about interaction designs at that time, at least in China. So it was more about there's web design, there's HTML and the CSS, Flash. I live in that age. So it's also the passion of, I think for me, I always had the passion of realizing the design into something real, not something that's only in concept. So I like making things real. So that's why at that time in school, while learning designs, I was also passionate about HTML, all those coding stuff, because I want to convert my design into a real product that other people would be able to use. So it's
Mhm.
the same thing, even though now it's the different product, but that passion has never changed.
Cool. So this is a good way to close, I think. Who are the designers that are your heroes, or companies that you admire for their design uh, skills and the stuff they show? Or who are your favorite design bloggers or design websites?
Yeah, I think actually from that perspective, I'm more like a hybrid person. I think one thing I didn't mention is, I think the things I learned more at Zoom is actually about business.
Sounds
It's
like it.
actually, yeah, even though that, yes, of course I need to make sure the design team is up and running, but I think a lot about how each department actually fits into the business. And I actually so Eric had his executive team to read one business book each month, and
Wow.
he would send them the book. So I wasn't on that list because it's part of the executive team, but I would ask him personally about that list, and I would read each one of them. I think it helps you to understand what they are thinking, and then you can think back, oh, from a design perspective, how much your team is fit into that bigger picture. And then it would help you to think how much you need to do from which perspective. So I think that's the things I learned more than design, I would say, from Zoom.
Very interesting. Good. Thank you so much. And I want to thank everybody for for showing up tonight and encouraging my behavior, as certain friends of ours like to say. And I'm very delighted, Shawn, that we got to visit a little bit in public. And I'm hoping that you're going to be back in the States sometime soon, and we could actually
Hope so.
see one another in person, have a lunch, you know. Ted, you're back showing. Do you want to say anything?
Well, I really appreciate this frank conversation about a very critical piece of infrastructure that depends deeply on user experience and your experience and your story about how it's about people, business, as well as design, and of course, use cases that are shown by all of the people that interact with you, and the constraints that we all have on implementing the very best or even all of the things that people want. So with that, thank you very much, Nancy and Shawn. And I hope everybody got something from this, and send people to look at this video. I think there's a lot to learn from watching it.
Thanks, Shawn. Thanks, group.
Thank you.
See you next month, and we'll learn about the Minskys.
We hope, yes.
Yeah, okay, we're hoping for that one. Good.
That's 80%.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
everyone.